pledge will be led by the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson.
I'm here this morning just to address education. How do we know? Because the people have told us so. We represent the ideal way to alleviate the shortages is by ensuring that children of all races and both genders receive the basic grounding in science and mathematics that will prepare them to pursue careers as scientists, engineers, and technologists. Is it not time, then, for America to grow morally? For those who fear to answer this question, I will answer it for them. The time is now.
Now more than ever, what happens in Washington impacts us here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Your Congresswoman, Eddie Bernice Johnson, will help you understand what goes on inside the federal government and share perspectives from today's leading policymakers and opinion leaders. And now, your Congresswoman, Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Hello, and welcome to today's report from Washington. My guest today is Dr. Sherry Mueller, the president of the National Council for International Visitors. And the National Council for International Visitors is a professional organization for the international exchange community. And it's nothing more important right now than to have an active organization like this one. Dr. Mueller has been with this organization since 1996, and after 18 years at the Institute of International Education, she has devoted much of her life to teaching and writing about public democracy and diplomacy in many parts of the world. And she received her master's degree and PhD from the Fletcher College of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. So I want to thank you for joining us. This really is an important organization.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Congresswoman Johnson, and thanks for all the ways you support citizen diplomacy and public diplomacy.
Well, I tell you, we need all the diplomacy we can get right now, so that you must feel you're very much needed now.
We certainly do. I think it's never been more important for individual American citizens to understand that they can play a role in putting Uncle Sam's best foot forward. I think President Obama's talked a lot about the need to reboot America's image, and our organization and other citizen diplomacy organizations really give individual citizens a chance to be involved, interact with foreign leaders, and really make a difference and turn the anti-American image around.
I'm just delighted to know the organization is growing and has been national. I participated in International Visitors many years ago in the 60s. And in Dallas, Texas, and it was my first real exposure to international leadership.
Well, the State Department's International Visitor Program often provides that for political leaders, for business leaders, even for students and other citizens. And if you were active in the 60s, you probably knew the founder of our organization, the national organization, as well as the founder of our organization in Dallas, Mrs. Loren Emery.
That is right. She was the one that was the spirit and the energy behind the organization at that time.
Well, as people always said, you can't say no to Mrs. Emery, and she was a role model for me for many years. And in fact, we're about to present, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota will be presenting our NCIV Loren Emery Award for Outstanding Volunteer Service at our national conference, which is beginning tomorrow evening here in Washington. And Senator Klobuchar will be doing that at the opening plenary, and a wonderful volunteer from Minnesota who's been active encouraging women political leaders and has lived a whole life of public service, including being an outstanding citizen diplomat. Emily Ann Tuttle will be receiving the award.
That's wonderful. You know, it's so good to have people who are willing to give their volunteer time, to take the time to learn about other cultures, to have people in your home so that they can learn more about yours. I must admit that recently I have not been directly involved with the organization, but I have been involved just traveling and receiving a number of visitors here on the Hill. And it's a very meaningful organization. This is really very, very important to the visitors that come to our country as well.
Well, you said, Congressman Johnson, an important word, which was welcoming them to our homes. And one of the things our member organizations, and there are 92 community-based organizations all across the country that are part of the National Council that engage in citizen diplomacy. In fact, 6 of them are in Texas. So Texans do a great job at, as we put it, building friendships around the world one handshake at a time. But our members host foreign leaders who come on the State Department's International Visitor Program, and they host them for professional appointments in their schools, in their offices. I thank you for doing it on the Hill here when they are in Washington. That's awfully important. And as important, they also host them in schools and in their homes. And I think at our upcoming national conference, we have 2 alumni of the International Visitor Program, a member of Parliament from Kenya, as well as a journalist from the Netherlands, and they will be talking about how this trip impacted them when they came, in the case of the gentleman from the Netherlands back in 1995.
That sounds great. You know, it makes me feel really good as an American to know that this still goes on, sometimes in a quiet manner, but it's so effective. I didn't realize just how effective until I started traveling more internationally and realized how important that the visitors think it is to be received here by someone who will host them.
Well, one of the real challenges is to help keep the funding for these programs in place, as you can imagine, because they're a long-term investment. I mean, I know how interested you are in science education, and that's a long-term investment too, and we have to figure out how to find resources for those kinds of things. Just to give you an example, in the packet I prepared for you and your staff, the State Department has this wonderful list of alumni of the programs by continent who are chiefs of state or heads of government. For example, President Sarkozy of France came on the International Visitor Program back in 1985. Hamid Karzai came in 1987. So it's a long-term investment in good relationships for the U.S. It's a program that really links our leaders with their foreign counterparts, and those counterparts make decisions that affect our best interests. Sometimes years later, sometimes the next day.
Well, that's one of the great advantages of having student exchange or any type of exchange between the cultures. I think they learn more about democracy by coming and visiting than what we can teach them on their grounds.
And you know, one of the wonderful aspects of citizen diplomacy as we practice it in the United States is that ordinary Americans are involved. I don't know if you realize it, but last year was the 50th anniversary of that novel, The Ugly American. And I think that book and in other ways we learn that it's so important for individual citizens to reach out because they often have credibility that governments just don't have. And I think it was Secretary of State Colin Powell who said the best public diplomacy that we can have is to get as many people as possible from all walks of life to the United States, meeting Americans in their homes, in their schools, and actually seeing our democratic institutions at work. There's so much out about us in films and headlines, and I think first-hand exposure to our values, our people, the diversity, and our democratic institutions is really indispensable if we're really going to continue to play a leadership role in the world.
That is